and welcome back to the NWA 1983 project. I'm your host, Lex G, and with me, as always, is Matt Riley. How you doing tonight, Matt?
I haven't blown away yet, so that's good.
I can definitely hear like my shudders like with the wind here. It's pretty insane. So, climate change is real, people.
Years ago, we had about 6 trees taken out on my property.
Yeah.
Because one went down and like amazingly went into my neighbor's yard, missed his boat, missed his shed, and like went perfectly in the right spot.
Nice.
And I had this crew come down to do the tree, and they were like, you want any other things done? I was like, what would you give me for a quote for the rest of them? And he wanted like $200 extra for about $1,000 worth of work. And I was like, done.
That's awesome.
Best move I ever made. All those trees were like 70 years old. They were dying. Man, my neighbor's house actually one year I watched a tree. Like, watched it go into her house.
Oh, God.
Well, that's the tree moving. Boom!
Sucks.
Cracked the roof. That was a crazy thing. I call her. I'm like, a tree just hit your house. She's like, is that what happened? I mean, if I heard a huge smash into the house I live in has been hit by a van twice. Not the same van.
Was it like, does he free candy on the side?
No. One was the neighbor across the street. I'm on a hill at the bottom almost. And one, it was a standard, didn't put the e-brake on, rolled and hit the porch. And then the house up almost at the top of the hill, one of the children was autistic, and he got in the van by himself and put it in gear. And it rolled down the hill, bounced off my front steps, and I have a secondary driveway that goes down to the bottom part of the house.
Okay.
And it was like wedged. It's on my Facebook page. It was like wedged there, and I was like, wow.
Insane.
My grandmother didn't realize it happened at the time.
Amazing.
Yeah, she was a little hard of hearing at the time.
So this show will be another cornucopia of great matches, a best of the NWA, as we prepare for our big show, our big closed-circuit event back at the Omni, folks. They used to run the Omni all the time, so again, you'll see a lot of shows emanating from the Omni down in wonderful and beautiful, palatial Atlanta, Georgia. And it's funny because Atlanta at the time was in flux in '83 too. It was weird because they were about to be bought out by the WWF.
Yeah.
At some point, I think that was in '84. But so going back, this might be the last show we do for the year. So I just want to go back to the beginning a little bit and let you guys know what we're doing exactly here. This is the NWA 1983 project. So the concept of this show and what you're seeing on the screen is, what if the NWA went national in 1983 before Vince McMahon did, and kind of how that would play out and how that would look like. So essentially, the premise is like I get in my DeLorean that's parked out front with a bag full of money, lots of money, and buy the NWA, which I don't know it's actually possible. Someone recently bought the NWA, but essentially I would go to all these promoters with a duffel bag full of money and kind of get them together. We're going to go national, so we're going to have 2 shows on national television, one from TBS and the other one being on ESPN. I'm personally going to be taking over the Los Angeles territory. So that would be working out of Los Angeles and moving the NWA office from wherever it is. Time might have been St. Louis or Crockett. I think it might have been Kansas City, actually, with Geigel, who was president at the time. And we're going to move that to Los Angeles, and then we'll get these promoters to work with me. And we're going to institute stuff that would help us not only go national, but sustain all the territories kind of where they are. So we're going to talk about talent exchanges, talent helping out some of these promotions. We're going to have revenue sharing.
Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah. We're going to have revenue sharing. I can imagine how that conversation with Bill Watts go. He'd probably slap me in the face and throw me out of his office. He'd probably beat me up. Revenue sharing. It's communism. Like, no, Bill. If you get on hard times, we will support you and keep you afloat. As long as you help some of these other promotions like Kansas City stay afloat while they're struggling through some hard times. And we'll try to keep everyone afloat, ready to go, keep their TV strong, perhaps even pay some of these networks or local stations to have our wrestling on their on their television stations, so Vince can't come in with a check and try to buy out TV time slots for the syndicated program. We're talking about national syndication, international syndication, expanding some of the core territories to maybe hit towns that you wouldn't normally hit historically, and really give it a go. And what that would look like, in terms of a national wrestling alliance. Would that work in actuality in 1983? Possibly, could be, probably not though. One of the big things would be a lot of celebrity involvement and kind of getting people where we need them to be. The stuff that we all talked about on the program prior, and kind of my vision for the NWA going forward. I think the hardest part would be trying to get some of these promoters to work with me. Like, going into like Fritz von Erich, and we'll go over all the promotions that are currently in our stable of promotions. So we have the Los Angeles territory, which is run personally by myself. We have Portland, who's Don Owens. We have All Japan Pro Wrestling with Baba. New Japan with Inoki. Memphis with Jerry Jarrett. Mid-South with Bill Watts. Florida with Eddie Graham. Georgia with Ole Anderson. Crockett, obviously with Jim Crockett. World Class with Fritz von Erich. And Puerto Rico on WWC with Carlos Colon. And CMML in Mexico. So that's going to be our global promotion. And those are the guys that I'm working with, and eventually we'll probably end up going to a Vince McMahon WWF type model as we go through more of the process. We'll see how that works out, and who's going to be on top, who's going to be our big stars. We'll work on national television, using some of the Vince McMahon playbook to make sure that we keep everyone afloat, making money, and we can prevent a national expansion by Vince McMahon. I've said it on this program personally that the NWA was never built to deal with a larger rival promotion.
Yep.
They were built to kind of squash any kind of local outlaw promotions that came into your area, but they weren't prepared to take on Vince McMahon or even a Vern Gagne if he chose to expand. They just couldn't cut it. Like even if Vern went into like St. Louis, which he did, he actually bought a piece of St. Louis in '83. There's nothing you could really do about that. They just had a hard time, and a lot of it was like the old school mentality and keeping the border secure and that kind of stuff. And the WWF did have a hard time drawing in areas where the NWA was strongest, so they always had a hard time in the early days in North, South Carolina, Virginia, Louisiana, and Houston, and some of these areas where like the NWA strongholds. But eventually they got them, and everyone fell to Vince. So we're going to try to prevent that from happening, and we're going to try to keep some of our stars. Like when we get into 84, when we go into the NWA project at 84, we got to make some decisions on some people. So will Roddy Piper go to WWF? If I can promise him more, I'm out of Los Angeles. I can work with his agent. We're going to try to get into movies and that kind of stuff. And who's going to go? Who's going to stay? Will some of the members of the NWA try to leave us? We'll find out if that happens. So I think that's going to be really neat. But to take it back to the beginning, when I was younger, I wanted to be on radio. It was a dream of mine to be on the radio. And sometimes real life gets in the way.
Sure.
You get responsibilities and that kind of stuff, and you kind of just you got to put your dreams over to the side, and you have mortgages and that kind of stuff. Stuff like that happens. But with modern technology and with a do-it-yourself mentality, it's one of those that you can go back to. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Is kind of go back to and kind of like, I have a voice, let me be heard. And I think the initial concept for the show started, I would say, about 10 years ago. I think it started with, I was watching some of these shows on YouTube. I think the first big one that I started watching and became a fan of and watched religiously at that point was the Wrestling Roundtable with Eric Santa Maria. That show was fantastic. I was a big fan of his and the show. I thought it was awesome what they were doing over there. It's something that inspired me to do what I'm doing now. So Eric personally has had an influence on me, and it has been an inspiration to me to put my fears aside, because I do deal with pretty severe anxiety. And anyone that knows anyone that has anxiety, it's a rough go for them. Anytime you're talking about a mental illness or something to that effect, unless you have it, you don't understand it. So having this type of, that's why it's literally taken me 10 years to do this, because I had to kind of work through that, get past it, And for me to achieve what I want to do, I had to figure out ways around that. That's basically how it started. A big proponent of wrestling podcasts, and I think Colt Cabana was the first one that I started listening to. I think it was the first one that actually had a podcast. Now every wrestler or anyone that worked in wrestling has a podcast now, and it's pretty amazing to see.
Those Ding Dong podcasts are fantastic.
I wish there was a Ding Dongs podcast. It'd be awesome.
60 minutes of ding, 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 ding.
They were awful, weren't they? Yeah.
They sure were.
But some of the shows that I had watched was Wrestlespective. If you haven't heard of any of their stuff, it's awesome. What they do over there, they basically, for a while, they had the Main Event Project where they went through all the main events of like all the pay-per-views, and they basically went through all the matches, and it was a great show. I used to, listen to that show all the time, and I still do.
Yeah.
So those are the two big shows that really kind of inspired me to do what I'm doing now and kind of really giving this a go. And then there's a show that I started recently watching that I thought was fantastic. It's OSW Review. If you see their videos on YouTube, they're fantastic. So well done. Great production value, the whole nine. Those guys are hilarious. So I find them really interesting. And if you guys haven't seen their show, definitely check it out. I think it's fantastic. So when I was muddling around with the concept of this show, I think a lot of it stemmed from the conversations I would have with my best friend on the phone regarding wrestling. And, we would get into these debates, not so much heated, but we would just, talk about, wrestling current events and wrestling history. And he's a generation after me, so he has a different take on wrestling. Big Attitude Era fan, that kind of stuff, where I'm more of a, late 80s, new generation type fan. So
sure.
Sometimes our ideologies don't match up. But the debates were always great. Unfortunately, he was unavailable to do this show because he was the original person I had in mind to do this with me. But unfortunately, he became unavailable. But Matt was available.
Uh-huh. That's right.
And Matt brings a different take on this show. Again, he has a worker's perspective, being trained by Killer Kowalski. So he has a different perspective. And I think he might be a generation before me. Is that correct?
I was kind of and you're a little bit. I mean, I grew up on early 80s to mid 80s. Like my heyday for getting into wrestling was like the 86, 87 years, where I went from like kind of casual to like absorb everything,
Yeah, I think I told the story that I started watching wrestling in 87, but wasn't religious about it until about 89.
Well, I think my earliest days was always a head-to-head competition between WWF like Superstars in the morning on Saturdays, 11 o'clock, or Super Friends. So I'd often watch Super Friends, and then the commercials click over to wrestling, and then click back, and then at the half hour watch the second half. I'm as hip as I was then.
And for me, being out of New York, one of the wonderful things that we had here is that our cable carrier, mine specifically, had WWF, had NWA. We got Memphis up here for a little bit. We had Florida up here. I got World Class on some sort of financial news network. ESPN with AWA. So I was able to, I was one of those, and I still am. I was like, I'll watch any type of wrestling, no matter how good or how bad it is. I watch it all. At that time, I just like, wow, Colonel De Beers, he sucks. And
Colonel De Beers, oh.
And I'm like I was one though. Like I wasn't a smart fan, but I knew that the Undertaker was Mean Mark. You know what I mean? Because I had watched Great American Bash '90, so I'm like, hey, Undertaker, that's Mean Mark. Because when you watch different promotions, you see like different stuff. Like I knew who Ric Flair was before he came in the WWF. I was a big fan of Larry Zbyszko and that kind of stuff. And I watched. I think I counted one time. I think I watched about 16 hours of wrestling a week.
Oh yeah, when you get into your peak, when you're really absorbing it, and you're watching. What I used to do, this is how bad I was. I used to get newsletters from around the country. So I get the Pro Wrestling Torch. That was my mainstay. I still have the articles I wrote for them, sadly enough. I used to get this one called Controlled Mayhem.
Okay.
By a guy named Brett Bond, and it was just done like every other week or so. And it was a recap of like Continental Wrestling and a few other things. But it was just, I lost all these old things in a flood. But man, they were just like, I absorb them. And then there was the Pacific Northwest, which I forget what it was called. But it was back like, Rip Owens and Sandy Barr and, It was a way to absorb it because he didn't have the internet really.
No, and we're both pre-internet guys too.
Right, and so what I would do is I would go on like wrestling magazines and order tapes. One of my favorite tapes I still have is the Bloody Bloody Matches of the Caribbean, it's an awful tape, but it's fun, you know. I will say, one of the hidden scenes, I'll probably have to talk about it, but I can share at some point the story about the bizarre dude from New York that tried to seduce me when I was a kid.
Was it me?
No, it was not you. It was some guy in the city. It's a friggin' hysterical story. We'll tease that for another time, but I don't want to go into it.
It's funny because like you were a dirt sheet type guy, and I strictly read PWI. Like I thought that shit was all legit. You know, I bought it look like, and I'm thinking I'm getting like, you know, backstage behind the scenes stuff in the PWI. Yeah. Knowing that it was written completely in kayfabe. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like, hey, that's Moondog Spot hitting Jerry Lawler in the head with a kitchen sink. And it was completely ridiculous. But the pen pal thing was weird. Because how many people probably got sexually abused by trying to go to some dude's house talking about wrestling?
That was a time where I was like, if my parents knew people I was talking to, because there were some strange cats out there.
Wrestling fans are weirdos. And I'm a wrestling fan, and I'm a weirdo too, and we can smell our own. Yes. But yeah, wrestling fans are weird people. I'm not talking about like, you know, you're hardcore fans. Yeah. But yeah, some of those guys are a little out there.
Just a wee bit.
Bless their hearts. You know, I used to buy tapes, and I forget how I did. I remember taking my bike and driving it to the post office to buy a money order to buy tapes. You know, I'm a big footage guy. Like I had like my garage before I transferred everything to my computer. Yeah. Was full of tapes. Like I used to have like Rubbermaid totes full of tapes. You know?
I was not quite that bad, but I had a lot of tapes. What I would do is I'd make up mixtapes, if you will.
I did the same shit.
And I'd have like I had one called Greatest Matches, and it had like Flair, Sting, Bash 89, I think it was. I had Funk, Lawler, Empty Arena. Like it was, if I could find it, it's probably somewhere out there still in my house, my old parents' house, I should say. But it was just like match after match of like good matches. And what I would do is when I started going to wrestling school, I'd watch the matches and write down certain like sequences or spots and try to incorporate them in a way that was not quite a copycat. So instead of like a drop kick, like Flair would do the thing to the corner turnbuckle where he'd throw himself over, I would go into the turnbuckle hard, bounce off, but like then throw my body to the top ropes, but then bounce off the top rope and hit the mat.
Jesus.
And it looked awesome. It looked like I got killed, but it was a ricochet effect, you know? And I've never seen anyone do that except for maybe one guy from Japan. I was like, that's the move I should do! And it's fun because you think, like, you know, with this whole wrestling, I might be getting back in the ring, but that's a whole other story. But if I do, I keep thinking, like, I could never wrestle that style anymore. I'd have to have a whole new style of wrestling. I was like a high-flying, like, pinball. And I'm going to break it up.
Monkey. You're killing the business, Matt.
What? What? Oh. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Screw those guys. But no, it just, I think a lot of people, they don't know or don't realize that, you know, back before the internet, you know, it was a lot of work to get the things you wanted to collect.
And it was funny because I think I got in the internet circa 1995. You know what the first thing I did? First thing I did when I got the internet.
Did you write to a Nigerian prince?
No, I looked at porn. And then after that, I went to a website that had all the wrestlers' real names on it.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, Hulk Hogan's real name is Terry Bollea. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't go off and I was one of those guys who would use their real name too, like a dickhead. Like when I was talking to other wrestling fans.
One of my earliest internet things I did was I was at Merrimack College visiting one of my friends, Ted. Nathan and Ted, they're roommates, and Ted had AOL Online, and he was in a chat room. So I went into a Boston chat room, talked to a girl, set up a date, and had a date like 3 days later. And I always remember that date because I met her, and a friend of hers was a friend of mine, and I got hit by a car in front of the Boston Garden that night. I was crossing the street, and this guy's making out with this girl in the car. So I'm crossing, and he just hits the gas. So I go open the hood, and I'm like pissed off, and I'm screaming. And my friend was like, everyone just got out of your way, like when you cross the street. I'm like, who does that? And I remember she was one of those girls, like, I think back, like, oh my God, like, I just made a date with a complete stranger in like 30 minutes.
I did the same thing. I met a girl at a train station, like 45 minutes away from my house.
Why not?
So weird.
So how's that restraining order working now?
She was a weirdo too. I forget her name too. It was weird.
No.
Because that's what I did. I would go in the chat rooms to try to hook up with chicks.
There's two things, and I'll say this in full disclosure. The first screen name I used was the Mad Atheist. I went into Christian chat rooms.
Oh, boy.
Oh, well, it came back to haunt me, but that's okay. I got better, but it was just to mess with people. But it was really entertaining. It was so awful. I'll never forget one of the first internet nudes I ever saw. Was a friend of mine tried to download a picture of Alyssa Milano nude. It was obviously a fake, but it was so slow. We left, went to campus like to eat, and came back, and it had just finished. Like terrible.
And then later on, when they had like the QuickTime movies, like I get clips. I remember watching.
Oh my god!
Watching a clip, like I was waiting for it to load up. It was like 20 minutes, and it was just a clip of Kevin Nash dropping Big Show on his head with that power bomb. And I was like, oh, ridiculous. But with the advent of YouTube, and you can literally watch. I'm big into watching Superstars and All American from 1989 because it's all on there now.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And with some of the stuff that you see on there is completely ridiculous. Like there's angles that just don't go nowhere. Mm-hmm. And like you see guys debut and then you never see them ever again.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, Big Bully Busick, or like, oh, Barry Windham is the Widowmaker. It's like, what is
Barry Windham is the Widowmaker? Oh man.
I was like, boo. And you would see some of the most ridiculous shit on those shows, and those shows are fantastic. I love watching those because it gives you a better understanding. When you go on the WWE Network, they have pay-per-views and they have Raws on there and stuff like that. But some of these older pay-per-views, like, hey, I want to see the build-up to Royal Rumble '91, or like Earthquake debuts, and they did Earthquake's debut was so slick.
I don't remember it.
All right, so they had Dino Bravo. Dino Bravo comes out to the ring. He's like, oh, I'm the world's strongest man, not just the Canadian strongest man. And blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to prove it by having Jimmy Hart sit on my back while I do push-ups. And Mean Gene's in the ring. He's like, Jimmy Hart's like 100 pounds. You're not going to prove anything by doing that. And then Jimmy Hart's like, I'll pick someone from the audience. And they're going around looking. And they spot, this huge guy. And it's like, you come down to the ring. So the guy comes down to the ring. He's like, oh. And Mean Gene's like, what's your name? He's like, oh, my name is John. He's like, you're from West Virginia? He's like, yes, sir. He's like, oh, can I ask you how much you weigh? He's like 460 pounds. So he gets on Bravo's back, and Bravo does the push up, and then the Ultimate Warrior comes out because Bravo challenged him, and the Ultimate Warrior is like, you have nothing to fear, big man, because Earthquake was pretending to be all scared and shit. So he sits on Ultimate Warrior's back, and then he jumps him, and they just beat him up. It was awesome. Like, this fan just beat up the Ultimate Warrior. But it was an evil plot by Jimmy Hart and Dino Bravo to beat up the Ultimate Warrior. But that was so well done. And you miss shit like that. You don't see that shit because it's it's missing.
Yeah, there's definitely some good like they used to do a better job of packaging some of the arrivals. Like there's a guy recently came in on board, and I can't think of his name, of course, but he was like on SmackDown, but he'd cut these like 3-second promos. And it would just be stupid as shit and be like, what do I care about this guy? Like, give me the $1 million man going to the pool for the poor kids and kicking them all out.
That was awesome.
Give me that. Give me Dusty Rhodes plunging shitty toilets. Give me something worthwhile.
I did the vignettes, Mr. Perfect.
Right.
And they're so awesome.
My God, who didn't try to do the Mr. Perfect basketball shot over the shoulder, right?
Yeah, those are great. And you see people evolve, like you see the evolution from Lanny Poffo to the Genius, and you saw the coordinations with Randy Savage, and even they had a debate with Ken Patera and Bobby Heenan.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was awesome. It was like, Bobby Heenan, you left me in jail because he was in jail. He's like, you didn't give a shit about me while I was in jail. It was like, I won't be a babyface now. Fucking Ken Patera's a babyface, so whatever.
Oh
You know?
God, Ken Patera as a babyface. That makes
He was a fantastic heel, but when after he got, he I guess he got off the juice or whatever, and he wasn't as big as he used to be, and he cut Andre's hair.
Did he?
Yeah, he's the one that cut Andre's hair. It was him and Stud. He walked around with a bag full of Andre's hair.
I don't, I
It's
don't remember
awesome.
that.
It's awesome. This is good shit. And it's cool because on YouTube too they have a lot of the international shows I didn't see. Like I never got Wrestling Spotlight. Like that's a show called Wrestling Spotlight, and every week they would have like someone else host it. So it'd be Vince and Sensational Sherry, or Vince and another wrestler, and a couple with Miss Elizabeth. And those are really good shows. And then they had Primetime, which was fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Primetime, you saw all that good house show matches. And they had all that shit with Bobby and Gorilla. And that's a damn shame. And then you're talking about NWA, you're talking about 605 Wrestling.
Damn right.
The goddamn mothership. And you see like all the fantastic stuff. Like, remember when the Horsemen beat up Dusty and they fucking tied his fucking hand to the fucking, I think it was a tractor trailer, and they fucking bashed it with a baseball bat?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. That was
I'll
fantastic.
tell you, I remember my family, my aunt and uncle used to have a Kentucky Derby Day party, and it would be on Saturday, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sneak upstairs to their house and turn on the TV and watch like as much of the wrestling I could, then go down and watch the race, and then I'd sneak back up to watch more of it. And it was always like, Denny Young versus Lasertron. Like, it was like the best matches. I think, Rock and Roll Express versus George South, the former junior heavyweight champion, and Dennis Stamp. But of course, I always attribute the ending with a, well, it was a fantastic match. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time. We gotta go.
And Shivani was on his game back then too.
He was.
And then either Bob Cottle or then David Crockett. I think Bob Cottle did the local North Carolina show, I believe. But I was like, oh, so good. And it was all promos. It was all promos and a couple of bullshit matches.
Right.
And we're talking about like 85, 86. When you get to like 88, it got weird, but Tower fucking Doom.
How's the steel match, baby? Oh yeah.
Well, I think overall, if you like professional wrestling, I like you. You're my friend.
Oh boy.
Well, I'll tell you the story. When I was in school, wrestling was cool when I was really young and that kind of stuff, and then it went to shit and no one talked wrestling. If you wore a wrestling t-shirt, you got made fun of, possibly beaten up. That shit's fake, it's gay, blah, blah, blah. You hear all that shit. So I was like,
Right.
So even though you were still watching, and I was at the time, I wasn't talking to anyone about it. And then when wrestling got popular again, like during the Attitude Era, still didn't talk to anyone about wrestling. They didn't wear wrestling t-shirts. Guys were weird too in my school. Like they would walk around like Mick Foley's book, and with their ECW shirt, with their big gold belts. I was like, yeah, fuck these guys. If you did that, we're still friends. But I was like, ugh. And I was too busy drinking booze and chasing women.
Yeah, it's good hobby.
But it was like I just didn't have anyone to talk to regarding wrestling. And I found one kid at my job who liked wrestling when we talked.
I will tell you, speaking of high school, Randy Savage is the reason I have two of my very best friends that I grew up with. One was freshman year we had to have focuses, so I was an art focus. And I was sitting in art class, we were getting, we were just kind of scribbling. So I started doodling a picture of Randy Savage dropping the elbow off the top rope on the Honky Tonk Man.
Nice.
And Brian was next to me, and he's like, dude, I like wrestling. That was it. Friends. The other was sophomore year, going in the bathroom, Brian and I are talking about something Randy Savage did, and this kid Sean was like, you guys like wrestling? And not only did I become good friends with Sean, but I was the best man at his neighbor, Nathan, who became one of my very best friends too. And at Sean's birthday party I went to, it was like a few months later, there was an infamous six-man match we had in the backyard.
Nice. And
I put Nathan over, I had him in the torture rack, and this kid, I think it was LJ, hit me in the head with the shoe, and I flipped Nathan over, took the fall. I'm a good guy like that, Nice. Put over the local hometown talent.
It's awesome.
But all because Randy Savage and a men's room.
And you wonder how many people's stories like that. Like I met my best friend because I liked wrestling and he liked wrestling too.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably a common story. So, guys, I figured we'd do a year in review on this episode. Everyone else is doing their year, the 2016 years in review right now. We're going to do a 1983 year in review because fuck those guys.
Sure.
So we had some significant events that occurred in 1983, and Matt, I want to get your thoughts on some of these. The Road Warriors make their debut as a team in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So what are your thoughts on the Road Warriors, especially early Road Warriors before they got their spikes and they looked like a weird 70s biker gang?
I used to like them. I think what happened with them is we talked pre-show about fake news stories and the impact they have. I think the mystique of the Road Warriors sold them, like in the magazines.
Yeah.
So they were sold as like this, phenomenal monster team. And you made the argument about Demolition being better workers. And I look back and I'm like, I think they were.
Yeah.
Road Warriors were good at what they did, but how long did it take them to win the tag titles? And I'm not saying that's against them. Although maybe we look back and like, well, Hawk had a Savage Coke habit. Maybe we won't give him the belt. But hey, everyone had a Savage Coke habit. It was the 80s.
Yeah, me too.
Hell, they gave it out in school lunches.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, you think about, well, where wrestling was, and, they were innovative in that, they were ahead of their time in the sense of lending that, that feel of, oh, man, these guys are coming. There's going to be a demolition match right here in the ring.
Those are the first guys, like, there were two guys that were fucking huge. They had a good look to them, like, and they look fantastic. And I think the underrated thing about the Road Warriors is their promos. Like, Hawk would cut these fucking promos, and you're like, holy shit, he's fucking crazy.
Yep.
And along with Paul Ellering, and it was like, oh, it was a nice package. I always remember when fucking Lawler and the pile driver in fucking Memphis, right?
Right.
Like, you hit the pile driver in Memphis, it's like the guy's dead. You're killing people with that. It's fucking banned. So fucking Lawler hits the fucking pile driver on fucking Hawk, and Hawk gets right back the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like it didn't even phase him. You're like, holy shit. The whole crowd goes, what?
Yeah.
And that's some of the appeal of the Road Warriors. But when they had to start, selling, and then, they don't have to take some falls here, it hurt them. It reminds me a little bit of Goldberg.
I will tell you that one of my favorite videos was the Lords of the Ring, and it was by PWI. It was Bill Apter and Gordon Soley hosting it. And I must have watched that. I think my dad finally made like a DVD copy of it, but the quality is so shitty because the grain got so worn down. But I watched so much of those matches and enjoyed it and loved the way they presented it. And I always thought that's what a show should be like, a show that takes you around, wrestling.
Yeah. That's what we're doing here.
It show is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just an awesome tape, and I really enjoyed it. And I think, when you think back to the 80s, like the Road Warriors in that tape are presented like world killers,
Yeah.
And they were in a lot of ways, like you're right. Like I think the tying factor for them was the promos. They could sell the hell out of a match. You believed them when they said they were going to come in.
That's the big difference between the Road Warriors and like the Powers of Pain.
Right. Powers of Pain couldn't intimidate a Twinkie. I mean, Warlord was enormous, don't get me wrong. Barbarian was, a jack dude. But Paul Jones? I think he managed them. Like, Paul Jones, yeah, he's been around forever, but he looks like Roy Orbison's cousin.
Yeah. He's probably one of the worst wrestlers ever. I got to see him late in his career. He might have been good in Crockett in the early days, but what are you going to do? So our next big event is PWI revokes the recognition of the World Wrestling Federation as a world championship promotion. So they got stripped of their world title status. So now PWI is claiming them as a regional promotion. So they stopped calling the WWF Championship a WWF World Championship. It's weird. That's I'm assuming that meant something back in the day, getting world title status in PWI.
Right.
But in terms of overall, it's like, yeah. That's Bob Backlund. I blame Bob Backlund for that.
Yeah, Bob Backlund. Good Lord. Oh.
So the next big event, it was Vince McMahon withdraws from the NWA. And that's when he starts his expansion.
Yeah.
He starts syndicating his shows like WWF Championship Wrestling and All-Star Wrestling. and other American TV markets, and that's a big deal. Apparently, that's the meeting where Ole Anderson curses them out, and they just fucking walk out of the meeting and withdraw from the NWA. And I wish there was more information on that meeting, because that's the NWA. When I talk about meeting, it's the NWA convention. That was a big deal, and it kind of started a. And I'm pretty sure that Vince bought Georgia out of spite just to fuck with Ole.
Yeah.
And get that TBS time slot. Black Saturday. That shit sucked. Like, it sucked. That show, it sucked for a WWF show. And I feel bad for the people who like if you're down south, or you're one like in Ohio that had that the signal for TBS was really strong in, and that's the show you got to watch with the WWF.
Yeah.
That show sucked. It was worse than All-Star Wrestling or Championship Wrestling. Like, it was so different, and it was like they had like third stringers on there, and you didn't see a whole lot of Hogan on there, and it wasn't as good as the other shows. Like, obviously Championship Wrestling was their A show because that evolved to Superstars, but I was like, ugh,
yeah,
it's gross. Like, Big John Studd match is awesome. And it's funny because I would have put the guys down there that drew in Georgia. Like, I would have had like Paul Orndorff in matches down there, and then the commentary team was Vince McMahon and fucking Angelo Mosca, randomly for no reason.
Angelo Mosca.
Yeah, King Kong Mosca.
Wow,
it's weird. I don't know what they're thinking. Bad idea. Next up is the WWF purchased the rights to the World's Women's Single and Tag Team titles, were previously an NWA sanctioned championship from the Fabulous Moolah, and renames them the WWF Championships. How is that even possible? Like, was Moolah just like, I'm the champion? I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
She was champion for 20 years. Like, it was her belt, and she trained most of the women wrestlers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, we're gonna bring Moolah in, and we're gonna buy the championship. NWA is not getting women wrestling anymore. Next up is the WWF published its first magazine, Victory Magazine.
Oh, Victory.
And Superfly Jimmy Snuka on the cover.
Oops.
Well, in '83, he was having that big feud with Morocco.
Yes, and his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's not going to jail, so don't worry.
He's gonna die anyways, right? Like, about to die?
Yeah. Oh, apparently. He's dementia or something like that. Alzheimer's. Some shit. Jimmy was good. I saw one of my favorite things ever is in Georgia they had the Freebirds break up, and then Terry Gordy got a new tag team partner. It was Jimmy Snuka, and he was wearing a cowboy hat. And anytime you see Jimmy Snuka wearing a cowboy hat, you're in for a good time. So next we had Hulk Hogan defeats Antonio Inoki in the finals of the first ever IWGP tournament, and that was in Tokyo, Japan. '83 is one of the bigger years for Hogan. He's really, really getting hot in terms of a babyface. Hulkamania is running wild at this point. Outside of WWF, AWA is trying to capitalize on the phenomenon which is Hulkamania, and they almost got a primetime special on CBS. It would have been on network television across the country, but then Hogan left. Well, that's what Greg Gage says. I don't know how true that is. So, what are your thoughts on pre-WWF babyface Hogan?
Oof. Well, I think Hogan's grown on me over the years as far as a performer, but
because when you get out of the I hate Hogan bubble a little bit, you get kind of removed from that.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be, people are able to appreciate him more. I think a similar thing's going to happen to John Cena in 10 years.
You think?
He's not as good as Hogan, but I think people are going to have appreciation for him.
I think my problem with Cena was always that his promos where he cut people apart, he went to areas where he knew they couldn't cut back against him. Now it's like, his thing was he always cut people down. So as a viewer, I'm like, why should I give a shit about this guy? You're gonna kill him anyways. There were so many times he had a challenger that I never ever suspected would have a chance to beat him.
He didn't sell not in the ring, but he never sold anyone as a legitimate threat against him.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh yeah, hustle law and respect. I'm gonna win because blah 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 blah. Not because this guy can really hurt me bad.
Yeah.
Like Hulk Hogan did with fucking Earthquake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when was the last time someone put fucking Cena out of commission? Like, we're gonna beat the shit out of him, and you're gonna go away. Even
Well,
when he,
I think they dropped the ball with the whole Nexus angle. They could have
Yeah.
that, and they really kind of like were like, "Hey, they destroyed this, and that was great. Let's move on." But no, you don't move on. You could have built so much around that.
and then he went. Remember that phase when he was depressed?
Ugh,
He lost a bunch of matches, and I was like, ugh.
it's a tough time for Johnny.
Hulk Hogan got depressed too. He started wearing black and got goth. This is pre NWO when he was.
Really?
Yeah, he was fighting Dungeon of Doom. They shaved his mustache,
Ah!
which is awesome.
Oh.
People give the Dungeon of Doom so much shit, and I constantly have to defend the Dungeon of Doom. I get it. He fell off the building, and then they had a monster truck sumo match. But listen to that again. They had a monster truck sumo match. It's awesome. I love monster trucks.
You know, if you buy a ticket, you pay for the whole seat, but you only need the edge. That's what I hear.
I'm a big Gravedigger fan.
My nephew's favorite monster truck, Gravedigger.
Yeah.
Kids love it.
What's it called? A Carosaurus? The fucking car dinosaur that eats fucking cars?
Yeah.
How awesome is that?
Fire-breathing Carosaurus!
And you would think you wouldn't see them a lot in New York, but they used to run the Nassau Coliseum all the fucking time.
Oh, yeah. They used to be at Worcester Centrum.
That's awesome.
Now it's the DCU Center.
Awesome. Next up is Southwest Championship Wrestling program on the USA Network is canceled by the channel, and the WWF takes over their time slot. And with its new program, WWF All-American Wrestling. This is important because, number one, it establishes the relationship between the WWF and USA Network, which obviously is still going to this day.
Yeah.
But All American Wrestling was a weird show. There is episodes of All American Wrestling where they focus on other territories. Like, you would watch it and like, oh, from Dallas, Texas, we'll see David Von Erich take on Iceman King Parsons. And they would have matches from Puerto Rico, and they didn't translate it, so they just kept it in Spanish. And there's an episode of All American Wrestling, I believe in '83, where it has Hulk Hogan in it. Like, this is before he comes. So what it looked like to me was like they're going to showcase guys they're going to steal the next year. Next up, Wrestling at the Chase, the longtime St. Louis wrestling program and production. And I believe the WWF takes it over for a while because there's WWF Wrestling at the Chase, which is insane too. Just think about it. It's like, oh, this is a mainstay of NWA wrestling, and St. Louis was the main headquarters for the NWA for such a long time, and seeing Vince McMahon's Wrestling from the Chase television program was weird. So next up, in October, this is October of '83, during a television taping at the Hamburg Fieldhouse in Pennsylvania, following a squash match where Magnificent Morocco defeated Victor Mercado. Morocco famously eats a meatball sandwich and drinks a glass of soda in between wrestling. Following the match, Morocco's manager, Captain Lou Albano, spits on the floor and on part of the sandwich, drawing laughter in the crowd and commentator Vince McMahon Jr. and Pat Patterson. Albano was not hurt in the incident. So basically what happened was following the match, Morocco's manager, Captain Lou, slips on the floor on part of the sandwich. So he falls and slips on the sandwich. The crowd goes nuts and laughs, and Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson start laughing on commentary, and Morocco tries not to laugh, but he thinks it's hilarious. Albano was not hurt in the incident. Airs on the October 15th broadcast of All Star Wrestling. During the same event, the Grand Wizard makes his last live appearance in his lifetime.
Oh, wow.
In squash matches in the corner of Sergeant Slaughter and the Masked Superstar. And that would air the weekend of the 22nd, 10 days after the Grand Wizard's death. His passing would not be announced for another week. On October 17th, Superfly Jimmy Snuka leaps off the top of a 15-foot high steel cage on a prone by Magnificent Morocco in their match in New York City's Madison Square Garden. The leap happens shortly after Morocco's been knocked outside the ring and inadvertently wins the match, thus successfully defending his Intercontinental Championship. The match aired live on USA Network. It did have major stars, future stars in attendance. The Sandman, Mick Foley, Tommy Dreamer, and Bubba Ray Dudley all cited this match as the reason they decided to pursue professional wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
On October 23rd, Tommy Rich defeats Buzz Sawyer in a bloody steel cage match in their climax of their 18-match feud. This event was dubbed the Last Battle of Atlanta. which is now available on the WWE Network. So, guys, check out that match because it's pretty good. October 29th, the sudden death of the Grand Wizard is acknowledged on WWF syndicated television. A rare break of kayfabe of wrestling in the time. A storyline was arranged in the following weeks, speculating who would take over as on-screen manager of his wrestlers that he would pair with on television. And in November, you had the inaugural Starrcade 83. It drew a sellout crowd of 15,477 fans, and 30,000 fans see the show on closed circuits. And super important, on December 27th, 1983, Hulk Hogan returns to WWF television and a TV taping in St. Louis. Those are some of the highlights from 1983. 1983, I consider the last great year of the territories. But you can see towards the end of the year, you can see it kind of falling apart, unfortunately. And it's sad, at least to me, that the territories kind of started to die out after that. I definitely want to check out that Morocco eating a sandwich match. It's so awesome. Yeah.
It's an old school, angle thing,
Yeah.
We'll have them eating sandwiches. Like, it's like the old thing about, the joke over somebody made at the table at SNL and ends up in the show. I have the same feeling that a lot of to this day, there are things that are in there, like Natalia farts, like got in the show because of Vince thought it was funny.
Yeah, he's a weird sense of humor.
Yeah.
He's a weird guy. What are you going to do? He's ridiculous. So that's 1983 and a condensed version 1983 in a nutshell there. And, when we get into 1984, maybe we'll do a 1984 year in review. But we are ending 2016. So Matt, what are some of the highlights for you in 2016 in terms of professional wrestling?
Oh, boy. I think Shane's comeback was interesting.
Yeah.
Not so much like, I wanted to, but I think what they've done with it has worked out pretty well. It was kind of a nice twist to have him against Undertaker to give them something to do, but it felt kind of like going back. Like, needed something for the Undertaker to do. Shane was free. I think the rise of Kevin Owens really was in AJ Styles as the kind of figureheads were notable.
I definitely agree. I think in terms of wrestler of the year, I would say it's AJ Styles for this year.
Yeah.
He's just great matches all around. He has his footing in terms of his character. He knows his character. He's good on the microphone. I think it's his year. I do like the Kevin Owens stuff with Chris Jericho and the list. I think that stuff's really good. We had the draft and the brand split this year. So that was something that I'm not a big proponent of personally. I'm not a big fan of the draft or brand splits in general. But, It is something new, something fresh. We had the debut of the Universal Championship, which I call the Fruit Roll-Up Championship. So I think it's ridiculous. You had the final deletion match over in TNA with the Hardy Boys. They had the
yes.
They had the match tonight. It was from the Hardy compound. They filmed the entire show there. And,
that was fun.
Spoiler alert: the Rock and Roll Express does compete in that match. So you can see the Rock and Roll Express because they're challenging any tag team from history, and in other wrestling promotions. So they made vague challenges to the Young Bucks and to the New Day, and they invited Vince McMahon to come down and Triple H, and they did a Triple H spot where they had shovels. It was like the man with 3 H's would be proud because we're burying young talent.
Yes.
So I haven't seen the full thing yet, and I'll probably give a report on that later on. So that was pretty cool. We had Goldberg's return, which is a big deal, defeating Brock Lesnar and the best possible outcome for that match. He had the Brock and Randy Orton getting his head fucking split open like a motherfucker.
Oh yeah,
and that was pretty brutal. We had the Women's Revolution this year. Charlotte and Sasha giving us really good matches. And you had Bayley and Becky as well. I think NXT really came into the zone this year, having fantastic matches. The Revival is amazing. If you've seen Revival matches, I'd definitely check that out. I think it's been a tough year for Ring of Honor. Nothing really grabbed, and I'm a big Ring of Honor fan, and nothing really grabbed and moved me this year. I just haven't been interested. And that's sad. Someone who I went to like 14 consecutive shows at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and there's nothing this year that really grabbed my attention. And now that they lost, Nigel McGuinness is going to be announcer for the WWE, And it looks like Steve Corino's going over as a trainer. This might be a tough time for ROH.
Yeah.
They just announced, I believe that was today. They just announced that they're having a UK championship. Did you see about this yet, Matt?
No.
So they're going to have a UK championship tournament.
So is this going to be a belt defended only in the UK, or is it going to be like we're going to have guys on TV defending it?
I think the belt's just basically a prop for the winner of the tournament. I don't know if this is going to be a championship that they're going to defend.
Like the European Championship?
Yeah, I don't think they're doing it that way, although they might. So a lot of people think this is a response to the World of Sports brand relaunching over in the UK. I said it before, and I'll say it again, that the United Kingdom right now is the hotbed of professional wrestling.
Really?
It's what Philadelphia was in the 90s, what Georgia was, what North Carolina was. Right now, the UK is where it's at in terms of, like, they're drawing, good crowds over there. The crowds are all hyped, so we'll see how that goes. So this will be a 16-man elimination tournament, and it'll be broadcast on the WWE Network, and it'll take place on January 14th and 15th. So I'm really curious about what wrestlers they pick. I think they already had a group of wrestlers. I don't have a list in front of me, unfortunately, but they do have a couple of guys: Trent Seven, Pete Dune, Tyler Bate, Wolfgang, and Tyson T-Bone. So they're bringing guys in, like they're bringing in guys for this event, much like they did for the Cruiserweight Classic. And I heard they're doing a women's tournament similar to get all the best women from the Indies and have a tournament as well at some point. So a lot of interesting moves that the WWE is making to kind of bridge the gap. So
to bring things back around, will the WWE become the thing they destroyed?
That's very possible. I mean, there's a possibility that they may have a show that just takes place in England, and they'll have a crew over there, and they'll just film matches over there in England, and the UK, and Europe. So, they can have a European brand. They can have a Japanese brand.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So, just we'll see how 2017 looks for them over there, and that's real interesting, So it looks pretty cool. All right, fantastic. So, guys, we are officially out of time again. Our next show will be live from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. And the main event of that show will be for the NWA World Championship. Dusty Rhodes taking on Wahoo McDaniel. And that should be a hard-hitting affair. So, for